Hey, I'm Lemmy Sita. Thanks for checking out the channel. And on this episode, we talk about identity, digital culture, and what it means to help the next generation become who they were made to be. And I want to ask you something. When is the last time you actually saw someone? Not glanced at them, not scrolled past, not managed them, where you actually saw them? Most of us would have to think hard about that answer. I think part of the reason is that we have turned the Imago Dei into a theological category instead of a practice. We know the doctrine, God made us in his image. We can define it, we can defend it, we can even describe it, we can debate it. But nobody taught us how to do it, how to practice the Imago Dei, how to actually live from it, how to recognize it in the person in front of us by learning how to see it in ourselves. I spent over 2 decades studying identity formation, how we become who we are, and what gets in the way. And one of the things I keep coming back to is this. You cannot see the image of God in someone else until you are formed enough to stop needing something from them. That's the connection between formation and the Imago Dei that nobody talks about. So in this episode, my friend Dr. Craig Detweiler, who is a filmmaker, a theologian, and an academician, he wrote a book a couple of years ago called Selfies that gave me a completely new category for this. The Imago Dei, not as something to just know, but something to practice. And in this conversation, we talk about 3 things. What it feels like when selfishness starts to wash away. Why the differences between fear and faith changes everything about how you show up for people. And why it's so much easier to feel something for a TV character than the person sitting across from you. And what that reveals about how formed we actually are. I can't wait for you to hear the episode in our conversation. So let's get into it.
It's hard for us to kind of lose ourselves or get out of our head or get into a flow state where we're not thinking about what we're missing or what's going on, what somebody else thinks, when we're just like in a flow of like
Activity.
fully present to
Yeah.
your surroundings and to maybe one thing or one person that you're centered upon.
Yeah.
So it's the kind of thing that happens maybe with meditation, and maybe that takes a long time to get there. I think the same thing happens in the creative process,
Yeah.
where once you get kind of all those other distractions out of the way, once you power down your cell phone, once you get away from whatever's dogging you,
Mm.
and you can be fully present to whatever's in front of you, that's when I think, get almost closest to that image of God, because I think that God, the creator, is in a sense in that
Yeah.
flow state, in communion with Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right? The 3 in 1. There is a sense of the relationality and the presence with each other and with the world. And when we can do that, and for us, it might be, you know, paintbrush and paper
Yeah.
and presence, trying to capture
Yeah.
something. It could happen as a filmmaker. Sometimes you might lose yourself in making something.
Yeah.
It can happen when you're editing something,
Okay.
right? Even editing a book or but you get so focused on the task at hand that in a sense your selfishness starts to wash away.
When you're describing that, I go back to selfies because the idea of the practice of seeing the image of God in somebody else is to slow down enough to be in that meditative, almost intimate state where you can, which is what you're saying, you get rid of that selfishness in order to then see the image of God in somebody else. And so that meditative and intimate is the word that comes to mind for me, is that flow state.
I think so. I think so. I mean, scientists have measured brain waves and that type of thing, like what happens, like while you might be writing a song or performing on stage, right? You rehearse all of that
Yeah.
to then maybe let go of the rehearsal process and like, I have to concentrate on this to be present, right? It's the
Yeah.
same reason why you might um read the Bible in a practicing kind of way. But what you were trying to do is internalize the concepts so that when you're confronted by a daily ethical dilemma, or a person
Mm,
whose heart is broken, or who needs some attention.
yeah.
At that moment, all that background training, rehearsing, becomes real, because
Oh,
now the performance is alive. You have to be
yeah,
fully in it. The first time I ever spoke publicly, like in junior high, I was probably running for, vice president of seventh grade class, and I just literally was shaking like a leaf.
yeah,
And I think it was because I was in fear rather than
yeah,
faith, right? I was in seeking approval or votes rather than, say, the approval of one,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So that kind of performing for others where you need them,
yeah.
yeah, where you need something from them, that's a
Whoa.
transaction, right? That's not the same as a gift.
And you're like creating art.
You're trying to be in that flow. You're trying to be in that moment of, I've prepared, I've done the rehearsal,
Yeah.
but the performance now, I don't know,
I
because I don't know
see.
how it's gonna be received.
As you're describing that, I've heard you speak a ton of times, right? And you kind of have this, I don't know if anyone's broken down like how you speak, but like you said, you have what you're going to say and you're in that flow state, but you also deliver things in like you invite us into the
Mhm.
question. And even though you're talking,
Right.
like sometimes you slow down enough
Mm,
to like help us to catch up to what you're saying.
mm.
And you almost, even in your talking, you create the space for people to like, because you don't just jump to the next point. You're like,
Right,
hey, you guys, consider
right,
this.
right,
Like,
right,
and I don't know how you do it, but I just
right.
know that like you walk us along in the journey and then you give us the space to breathe. And then I think I see you watch what's happening and then you play off of that.
Yes, you're trying to create, I would say, a live moment, not a canned moment,
Yeah.
right? Not a preordained moment.
I got
Because
it.
what you're trying to make is room for the spirit to surprise us. And as a speaker, I also want to be surprised. I don't want to say the same thing, and I don't want to have the same experience. I want to have the experience that this community needs in this moment in time.
Like, it's so easy for me to watch a show and tap into the humanity or the dignity
Yeah.
of that moment, but I can't do that face to face.
Yeah, well, that would probably be that selfish part of the show.
Because I was like, hey, when you explained that, I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense. We all have that ability to watch The Office and laugh, but we can't.
Well, because the show, the TV or the screen is inviting us to kind of watch it, like, slightly from afar. So I put my life aside, and maybe even my prejudices aside, and hold them at bay. And so I enter into this, I would call it a play zone,
Yeah,
which is why comedy is fun, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
play,
yeah.
but even drama, action, horror, it's all a form of play. So again, the problem is, I think, forget the playful side of life and who we're supposed to be. So we don't look at that person who we're
Ah,
dealing with as as a playmate, right? Someone to do a certain kind of public interaction
yeah.
with. We look at them as more like foe, right? Or as other,
Yes, yes,
right? And
yes.
so as soon as we're into the othering, then we're no longer into the imagining of the other person
Yeah, that's
as
it,
gods.
oh man, it's crazy that the suspension of disbelief is so easy for TV, but not in real life.
Right. That's all just pure prejudice.
Gosh. Here's what sits with me in this conversation. Craig said that when you're fully present to one task, one moment, one person, that is when you get closest to the image of God. Not because you've arrived spiritually, but because that is what God is. He's present, He's relational, He's attending. Now, here's what I want to add from a formation perspective. The reason why most of us can't do this isn't a spiritual discipline problem, it's a formation problem. When Craig talked about speaking from fear instead of faith, performing for approval, needing something from the audience, he was describing what I call a performer, someone whose identity is so wrapped up in how they're received that they cannot actually be present. They're too busy managing the outcome or managing how they look. And when he talked about othering, turning the person in front of you into a foe instead of seeing the image of God in them. That is what happens when we haven't done the work of formation. We project, we protect, and then we perform. The practice of the Imago Dei is not just a spiritual exercise, it's evidence of formation. So here's the challenge for this week. Pick one person that you've been othering. Maybe it's someone who frustrates you. Maybe it's someone you've written off. Maybe it's your teenager who feels like a stranger right now. And just try to be fully present with them. Not fixing, not managing, not performing, just present. Because you cannot see the image of God in someone you are othering. And you cannot stop othering until you know who you are. You can't stop doing that until you see the image of God in yourself. That is what formation is for. Now, if this episode connected with you, episode 1 of this conversation with Craig is already up. I'll put it in the show notes. It's called AI Cannot Incarnate, and it goes deeper on what we lose when we outsource our presence to technology. The link is in the description. You can find more of my work at identityspecialist.net, including the formation framework that we talk about that sits underneath everything that I teach. Again, thanks for checking it out. And as always, don't forget, be unique, but belong.